Hey guys, it's Luke Yon, and today I'm going to be doing another reading wrap-up for 2023. Today I'm going to be discussing the books that I read in August and September. So, as you can clearly tell, I am back home. I'm home for Thanksgiving break right now. It's currently Saturday, so I actually do have to go back tomorrow, but I'm home for 5 days, which is really nice. I definitely needed the break, and it's so nice to be home because I haven't filmed any videos since I've been in school, because I don't know why, it's just like very difficult to come up with video ideas when I'm not like in my room with all of my books, because I didn't bring any physical books with me to college because I'm from New York and I go to college in Virginia, so it's very difficult to kind of lug books back and forth. Either like on a really long car ride or, on a plane, because I go to college at the University of Richmond, so that's like 6-7 hour drive and at least an hour long flight, so it's a little bit difficult to kind of bring books back and forth. And also I knew like if I brought a bunch of books, I might not want to read those like while I'm in school, so I only read on my phone and on my Kindle now. So it's really nice to be back with all of my books, even if it is for a little while, because I do have to go back to school, and then I have 3 weeks, and then I come back for a month for Christmas and the winter. So I'll be back for a really long time, and I'm so excited to film a bunch of videos and vlogs and everything, because all the videos that I have posted since the semester has started were filmed before I left for college. So I haven't filmed in a while, and I'm really excited to be back and to tell you about the books that I read in the last couple of months. So the first book that I read in August was Ink and Bone by Rachel Caine. This is the first book in the Great Library series, which is kind of like a futuristic dystopian type novel that follows a character named Jess Brightwell, who lives in a world where the Great Library of Alexandria was never destroyed and has turned into this dictatorial superpower that controls all the flow and spread of knowledge in the world. So Jess is actually sent by his family to kind of be a spy and trained to be like within the library's services, so he's kind of getting in on the inside. And I ended up giving this book a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a very solid book. This is the second book that I've read from Rachel Caine. The first was one of her mystery books that I read like 2 or 3 years ago, I think, at this point. And this is a book that has been on my radar like since joining BookTube, and I did really enjoy it. I liked Jess as a main character. I do wish, I found myself like while reading, wishing that this book had been told in first person, because I did, even though I liked Jess as a character, I did end up feeling a little bit detached from him and his perspective. I really loved the world of this book though. I loved like the whole Egyptian kind of spin that it had to it, and all the information about the Great Library of Alexandria, because that has been like one of my fascinations since childhood. So I really liked getting to read all about that, and like all of them, him and like all the other people, all the other characters in this book that are like training to work within the library's sphere. So it was just really interesting, and seeing, there are kind of interludes before every chapter, which I can show you right here. So they kind of give a little bit of background into the world, and you get to see like snippets of different aspects, and I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it built the world up in a really interesting way. I do think there were a few like kind of weird like world building things where I'm like, I don't know if that would have like, if, this is such a big change, like to have the Great Library of Alexandria still exist and become this kind of tyrannical ruler of global knowledge. I was wondering like if, because it mentions like the printing press and all that stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know if like that would still be around, but whatever. I kind of had to suspend my disbelief a little bit while reading, but overall I do enjoy it, and I'm excited to read the second installment. After that, I read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. This is a new release this year, and it's from one of my favorite authors. I love a lot of Roshni Chokshi's books, and this book is a Bluebeard retelling. So it follows a unnamed man who ends up kind of being beguiled by this woman named Indigo, and the only rule she has for their relationship is that he cannot dig into her past, and he moves in with her, and there's all this weird stuff about her family, and like a lot of mystery building up, and this is definitely a suspenseful novel if you know the original kind of Bluebeard story. So I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it like a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved Roshni Chakshi's writing. This is definitely more of a character-driven, kind of mysterious book than something that's super plot-driven and like action-packed. Like some of Roshni Chakshi's other books, it was definitely a lot slower and introspective. But I really enjoyed the kind of build-up and the slow progression of the story. I really liked the main character, like the man, and then learning about Indigo and this other friend that she had that her new husband ends up learning a little bit about, named Azure. I just thought it was really interesting, and I liked the kind of, it feels like a very, almost like cozy book to read like on a rainy day in the winter or in the fall. It's just very atmospheric. Then I decided to pick up A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is another book that's been on my radar for a little while, and then I saw Hannah from A Clockwork Reader read it and really enjoy it, and I think we have similar tastes in fantasy, and I'm really glad that I picked it up because even though this is a pretty long fantasy book, I ended up reading it pretty quickly and really enjoying it. So this book revolves around this world, or this setting called the Isle of Cadence, and at the beginning of the story we learn that girls on the island have mysteriously gone missing, and one of our main characters, Jack, he is studying at a university on like another part of this world, and he ends up coming back to the Isle of Cadence for the first time in a really long while to kind of figure out what is going on with these disappearances. And this is the first time that Jack has been home after, again, being sent to the mainland to become a bard. He hasn't been back to Cadence for 10 years, and he ends up meeting, reacquainting himself with his childhood nemesis named Adara, who they end up teaming up to try to figure out the mystery. So I really enjoyed this book. It's a very interesting fantasy novel because it's not super action-packed. It's definitely a slower story and one that's more character-driven, but I really enjoyed all the characters. So we follow Jack and Adara, but we also get to know some other people in the Isle of Cadence, which was really interesting, and I liked seeing the plot kind of unfold through these different perspectives. And the book is sectioned into parts. So there's part 1, a song for water, then there's a song for wind, I think is another one, or a song for earth. And so after every section there's a big plot twist, and it just you really want to keep reading after every part, and even every chapter. Every chapter kind of ends on something that propels you forward, which I really enjoyed, and it made it a quicker read, because usually with fantasy books like this where they're not super plot driven and they're obviously a little bit more dense and long, I sometimes have a little bit of trouble getting through them. But this book, the writing was really interesting and captivating, the characters were great, and even though the plot wasn't super fast-paced, there was enough to keep me engaged, and there was a lot of stuff around the mystery which I found really interesting, and the magic system is an elemental magic system, but it definitely was a little bit different than elemental magic systems I've read about in the past, and overall I think it's a really solid read. I give it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm excited to dive into the sequel. Next, I read The Chaos of Stars by Kirsten White. This book follows a girl named Isadora, who is the daughter of these Egyptian gods, or an Egyptian god and goddess, and she ends up being sent to California to kind of be with her brother, I think it was, and she is kind of just grappling with the idea of being immortal and the real world and all of that stuff. And the tagline is family is forever, especially when you're immortal. So she's definitely grappling with a lot of stuff about her family and herself, and trying to find herself when she has all this magic and nonsensical stuff going on around her. So as you can tell, this book wasn't very memorable for me. I kind of had to remind myself of the plot and some of the character situations, just because even though it was a quick, light read, I didn't think, I kind of knew when I finished it that it wouldn't stick with me, and now having been removed from the book for a couple of months, that rings true. I liked the book for when it was, like, while I was reading it, but it's not something that I think will stick with me for a very long time. Like, I liked Isadora. I thought she was an interesting narrator, and I thought her situation and her, like, kind of, like, inner turmoil was interesting to read about, but the plot wasn't, like, anything that was super engaging. Like, I think she has to, like, work in this, like, museum renovation or installation, and she, like, meets a bunch of friends through one of her relatives, and I liked the kind of the way that Kirsten White wove in the Egyptian mythology, but, you know, overall it's just, like, not super memorable as a book. Like, I would recommend it if you need something quick and light to read that has, like, a little dash of fantasy, and, like, interesting character situations, but other than that, I don't think it's, like, you know, anything crazy. But, yeah, I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, and, you know, I love Kirsten White, I love her writing, but this just wasn't my favorite, from her catalog. The next book that I read was The Adventures of a Curious Cat by Curious Zelda, and, I actually didn't rate this book just because, I don't know, it was just, like, a cute little book. I listened to a lot of it on audio book, just because I was, like, needing something, like, quick to get through, and it wasn't, like, as quick or, like, as, like, fun as I expected it to be, but I do think that it was, like, interesting and cute to, like, read a book from the perspective of a cat, and it's just, like, you know, if you go into it, like, not taking it too seriously, like, you'll have a fun time, I think. Then I picked up Towards Zero by Agatha Christie, which easily became one of my new favorite Agatha Christie books. I don't really, like, know how to describe this book again, I guess, but there's, like, I guess I can just, like, read the back. It says, "What is the connection among a failed suicide attempt, a wrongful accusation of theft against a schoolgirl, and the romantic life of a famous tennis player?" So it's kind of like, if you can maybe tell, like, Towards Zero, there's all these different characters who end up coming together in one place, and all of these disparate plot threads end up coming together towards zero, towards a murder. And then, so the book is, the first, like, couple, or, like, the first couple, you know, maybe 100, 150 pages of the book is setting that up, and setting up the characters and their situations, and then there's 0 hour, and then Superintendent Battle comes and tries to solve the murder and figure out how all of these people are connected. And it is just, like, such an interesting book. Like, I loved the character studies within this novel. Like, there are so many interesting people in this story, and just the way that they all intersect, and the way that all their storylines come together was really interesting, in my opinion. And this is actually one of Agatha Christie's top 10 favorite books, like, that she wrote herself. And I can definitely see why. It's just, like, from a craft perspective, very fascinating and kind of difficult to imagine, like, how she wrapped all of this, like, into one concise story, because in the beginning you think, like, how can any of this be related to one another, but then as the story progresses and you get to the actual murder, things start unraveling, and I think the denouement of this book is fascinating and fast-paced, and, like, you can't catch your breath. And I read this book in, like, 2 sittings. It was so addicting. Definitely one of my new favorite Agatha Christie books. Then after that, I ended up picking up Cat Among the Pigeons by Agatha Christie, which is an Hercule Poirot novel. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember a ton about this book. I think I gave it about, like, a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5 stars. But it kind of, there's this stuff where one of the, someone ends up dying at this, like, English boarding school, and there's, like, a jewel thief, and somehow it is connected to this prince of this fictional Middle Eastern country dying, and it's just, like, again, like, kind of similar, honestly, to Towards Zero, where there's, like, these different plot lines that end up coming together. But I do think Towards Zero was a little bit better, but I loved the boarding school setting of this book. I loved the idea of the prince and the jewel thief, so I liked a lot of aspects of this book. I just think that sometimes it was a little bit slow, and I didn't love it as much as some other Agatha Christie books I read, so that's why I didn't get that full 5 out of 5 stars, but I would definitely recommend it. It's a super solid mystery. Then the last book that I read in August was the Honeymoon Crashers by Christina Lauren. This is an audiobook Audible special that is kind of like a sequel to The Honeymooners, which, if you didn't know, is one of my favorite books of all time. And this book actually follows the main character of that book's twin sister, who we get to know in that book. It follows, like, the couple. It's about that couple's marriage in Hawaii. So it's it's a little bit difficult to describe if you don't know the plot of that first book, and I don't want to spoil it, but this just is a spin-off. It's cute. It's a novella. It's like an audiobook novella, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. There was a full cast, so it kind of read... It was almost like a play, hearing it, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But otherwise, it was good. I enjoyed it. I gave it like a 3 out of 5 stars, but it doesn't really hold a candle to the original Honeymooners for me personally. Moving on to September, the first book that I read in September was Rain by Catherine McGee. This is the 4th and final book in the American Royal series, which takes place in America, obviously, and it's kind of like an alternate history type of book where George Washington, instead of becoming America's first president, became America's first king, and in modern day, the House of Washington still rules over America, and we follow 4 different characters. So the first character is Beatrice, who is the crown princess. So her dad is currently on the throne, and she is set to become the first queen of America. We follow Samantha, who is her younger sister, and she's kind of like the spare. There's like the heir and the spare. And then we follow Nina, who is the best friend of Samantha, and then Daphne, who is the prince's ex-girlfriend. So this is just like a really frothy, kind of like soap opera type story, and it's so fun. I love reading these books every year. They're so just like addicting, and you read them so fast because the characters are so interesting, and so like there's just like so much plot, and it's just like you cannot stop reading once you start. I do think that this is probably my second favorite book in the series. I do think book 3 is like the best book. I just really enjoyed all 4 storylines going on the most. But then I would say this one is a very close second. Like, obviously there had to be a lot of stuff that was being tied up and everything, but I really, like, the last book ended on such a cliffhanger, and I think this one picked it up really well. I thought the pacing was great, the conclusion was really satisfying, and overall I just think this is, like, a great series. Like, even though it could probably be, like, seen as, like, trashy or, like, a guilty pleasure, like, I think it's still a really well-written series with, like, interesting characters and great plots. So I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for something light and fun to read. Oh, then I read what will definitely be one of my least favorite books of the year, and that was Kingdom of the Feared by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the 3rd and final book in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I read The Kingdom of the Wicked and Kingdom of the Cursed last October, and I enjoyed them. I thought they were fun. They were, like, interesting fantasy books. I really enjoyed the second book, and I thought, like, where that one left off was so interesting. But this book just really was, like, very underwhelming, and honestly kind of put me in a reading slump for the rest of the month, just because it took me so long to get through it, and then I was like, ugh, I, like, don't even know what to read after this, just because it put, like, such a damper on, like, my mood. I don't even know how to describe this series, because where we start in the first book is, like, nowhere near where we end up in this 3rd installment, so I'm not even going to really describe it. Like, if you care, like, to get this far in the series, you'll probably, like, see for yourself. But I just thought that this book was so lackluster. Like, the cliffhanger wasn't even picked up in, like, an interesting way at the start. And I thought that it was just, like, very, like, I didn't like the characters. Like, I liked Amelia, and I liked, like, her character development in this book, but everyone else was just so boring. Like, Wrath, like, really was getting on my nerves, and all the side characters were really annoying, and I just thought this book was, like, so, like, smutty in, like, a way that just was not enjoyable. Like, even, like, Sarah J. Maas, like, even those books are really smutty, like, I feel like a lot of it is just, like, okay, but this book, it was, like, there was no forward plot movement. It was just, like, smut every chapter, and I was like, this isn't even interesting. Like, it's just not, like, a fun thing to read. like every single chapter, every single scene, like they would have a serious conversation, there would be like plot development, and then it would just automatically turn into smut, and I'm like, okay, like I don't even know, like we're not even getting anywhere. And I just thought this book was way like too long, and I just feel like it could have been condensed, or there could have been like way more plot lines to carry the weight of this story, because I don't know, I just thought it was like not the best conclusion, so I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read a short story called The Wedding Setup by Sonali Dev, and this is, I don't really, it's like a very short, like, romance novella that was on Amazon Originals, I believe. Honestly, I like am having trouble, like, describing this book, so I'll just read to you the description. On Goodreads, it says, Ayesha Shetty lost her brother 7 years ago, the same time she lost everything else important to her, her dreams, her fierce independence, and the man she loved. Not wanting to see her mother hurt anymore, she put her wild self away and became the dutiful daughter her mother needed, and took on her brother's role in the family business. Now her best friend's big fat Indian wedding is a chance to get away from her endless duties at the restaurant and maybe even have some fun if she remembers how. But a setup arranged by her mother, with a doctor no less, is the last thing she needs. The fact that he checks all of her mother's boxes just makes everything better and worse. Then Emmett Hughes shows up, her brother's best friend. The love she once chose over family duties and her responsibilities. The one she asked to leave, and who did. The one who knows the real Ayesha. Torn between a love from the past that could cost her the only person she has left and her sense of obligation to her mother, will Ayesha find the strength to stop thinking about what everyone else wants and finally put herself first? Or is the old Ayesha truly gone for good? So I really enjoyed Ayesha as a main character. I thought she was interesting and I liked her story, but I do think that this book could have easily been a full-length novel, because a lot of her past that I read to you in that synopsis is kind of glossed over throughout the novel, or throughout the story, because it just need to be fast-paced because of the nature of like a novella. I really liked the story though. I thought it was interesting and I liked a lot of the characters. It was just very fun. There was a lot of like culture infused into the story and it was cute and I liked it, and I just really enjoyed Ayesha as a character, and I wish this book or the story had been longer to become like a full book, because I think I would have enjoyed it even more, but I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then the second to last book that I read in September was The Other Queen by Philippa Gregory. This book is in her Tudor Plantagenet series, and this book follows Mary Queen of Scots in the time after she has fled Scotland because of the uprising, and she has entered England hoping for safety and refuge from her, or hoping for protection from her, hoping to receive protection from her cousin Elizabeth I, who is Queen of England, and it takes place over a couple of years where Mary Queen of Scots is under the, like, watchful eye of Bess of Hardwick and her husband George, and I loved this book. I ended up giving it like a 4.5 or 4.75 out of 5 stars because I just loved this story so much. You know, you would think, like, for a historical fiction book, it would be slow and, like, takes place over many years, like, it would be just, like, like, incredibly difficult to get through. But Philippa Gregory's chapters and scenes are so short, and we bounce between the 3 different perspectives of Bess, George, and Mary, to the point where it's just, like, super fast-paced and interesting, and you get to see, like, all of these different angles of, like, a single story, to the point where I just read this book so quickly, and it was just an amazing read. I love this sort of part-time and, like, part of history, I guess, like, the whole thing with the Tudors and the relationship between Mary Queen of Scots and Queen Elizabeth I. It was just so interesting, and there was, like, even a little bit of romance between, like, Mary and someone else, and, like, obviously there's the situation between Bess and George, and I just loved all 3 characters and narrators of this story. Like, Mary is such an interesting historical figure, and this part of her life is so often glossed over in, like, historical novels and historical movies, but I really loved the way Philippa Gregory focused on this point in her life, because it was such a monumental and long period of her story that is so often overlooked. And Bess was such a strong main character. Like, I loved her. She honestly carried the book in a lot of ways for me. Like, I always was excited to reach a chapter that was narrated from her because she just added so much to the story, and she was a very introspective character, and I liked reading about her, the way she viewed the world, you know, around her. And George was also a really interesting character. I liked that he was, like, a little bit of a weaker character, because obviously, like, these two formidable women, and then he's just, like, there. And I thought it was just, like, a very interesting dynamic between the three of them, and just, there was just so much to the story that I wasn't expecting to enjoy, and so much of the history that I wasn't expecting to be fascinated by. Just because a lot of this has been, is uncharted territory in, historical fiction. So I really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend it. It's a great historical fiction novel. Even if you don't like historical fiction, I think it's easy enough to read, as, one of your first, if you really want to. Especially if you want to read Philippa Gregory, I think this is a great one to jump into. Then the last book that I read in the month of September, and the last book that I'll be discussing in this wrap-up, was Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. This is kind of like a self-help book that I was just looking to read, or that I'd been wanting to read for a while, because I read one of his books and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good kind of anxiety book, and I heard good things about this one as well. And I did enjoy it. I think it was a little bit too long and jumbled, but I do think that there were some good kernels of advice within the story that I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed it. I ended up giving it, I don't know if I rated it actually. Yeah, no, I didn't rate it just because I thought it was a weird thing to rate, just because it wasn't meant to be read like a novel is, if that makes any sense. So I enjoyed it, and I thought that it was a good thing to read, especially if you're going into a new environment. I was first semester freshman in college, definitely a lot of changes, and I think this book helped me stay grounded a little bit, and it was just something that I could turn to throughout the month, because I read it throughout September. It was something that I could turn to when I was having a particularly difficult time. But that is it for this wrap-up. Sorry if it seems like I'm a little bit out of practice. I haven't filmed in a little while, but I am excited to upload this and get back into the swing of filming in towards the second half of December and the first half of January, because I'll be home for a month, which is really, really exciting. But that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I love to know what books you read recently, and especially in the months of August and September, and I'd also love to know your thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned in this video. But that is it. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!